Ahoy! The Fellowship and Fire patch is finally out, and I want to summarize it in a way that doesn't leave out any of the important details, so in order to keep this short and quick, let's get right into it. The first new feature are gear set storages, which allow you to quickly swap between different gear sets that you have. You have two by default. The Season 1 Season Pass is being introduced, along with a variety of different rewards, many cosmetics, some resources, and most importantly, an additional slot of gear storage. You can get more gear storage slots than that, by the way, by buying them in the shop for around 5 USD per slot. While you passively earn Season Pass XP, there are a variety of quests and activity cards that you can do to further your progress. Speaking of quests, there are also new quest lines. First of all, there is the new Silver Crows quest line, but there's also the Brightwood and Weaver's Fen main story quest overhaul, as well as the level 40 weapon and armor quest overhaul. The Silver Crows questline leads us right to the new expedition, the Empyrean Forge, a level 60 expedition in Great Cleave. Mutation for that starts this week. Here we encounter a new enemy type, Human, so you will need Human Ward and Human Bane. By the way, since the PTR they have changed Ifrit in the Empyrean Forge to also be human. From this expedition you also get a new Heart Rune, which is Firestorm. Similar to what was already the case for Outpost Rush weapons previously, you will now be able to upgrade a variety of gear with Umbral Shards from 590 to 600 and unlock a third legendary random perk. Along with that, the rewards you get from invasions are also significantly increased. Territory ownership cost and revenue sees various changes. Enemy spells now have outlines that make them clearly visible as not being from your allies. A massive, very important portion of the changes this patch are combat changes. Beginning with the PvE changes here, we have a damage increase to Bane on ranged weapons, both elemental weapons and physical ranged weapons. So those will be a little bit more useful in PvE content now. Along with that, mutator resistances have been removed, so any elemental weapon will be more effective in any mutation that previously matched its type, so Ice Gauntlet is better in ice mutations now. A lot more weapons also have taunts now. The ones that really stand out here are the Greatsword and the Great Axe. Next, we have changes that primarily affect PvP, though many of them also affect PvE. Abilities are now aimed to either be damage or CC abilities, not both at the same time, which leads to various adjustments to damage output as well as CC across the board. Gear score and the mitigation that you get through it have been adjusted. This also means that if you're not wearing any armor, this will now throw off your testing. Rend and Fortify receive a very significant change in that they now scale off armor. This especially nerfs Fortify on light and medium armor. The 300 Constitution Capstone perk now applies grit to your attacks like the 300 Strength perk previously did, and this also applies to the Void Blade now. The 300 Strength perk, on the other hand, now increases the base damage on heavy attacks, so overall you'll see a lot less thwarting strikes in bruiser builds. The crit formula has been changed, which means in most situations you will crit less often than before, though your base crit chance on some weapons has been increased in return, so if you are not running any crit before at all, then you may actually crit a little bit more. Medium and heavy armor now have built-in crowd control reduction, 10 and 20% respectively, which is similar to Freedom but not additive with Freedom. In return, they no longer have increased crowd control durations. Model Empowerment now has a 2-minute maximum duration and a maximum of 10 stacks, but it still refreshes, which has been reintroduced on the PTR. Transient Recovery's effectiveness has been slashed in half, making it a much less effective tool. Refreshing Move now has an internal cooldown, so if you're hitting multiple targets with an attack, it will only get one refresh. Attunements get a 4% damage reduction. Honestly, they're still pretty good though. If you enjoyed the video so far, consider subscribing and maybe leaving a thumbs up. Next, we look at the changes to individual weapons. When it comes to the Warhammer, that's just receiving significant damage nerfs across the board because it is a CC heavy weapon. This one looks particularly rough, but it's by far not the only one that's getting hit hard. Sword and Shield gets some noticeable damage nerfs, particularly on Leaping Strike, and no longer staggers on Reverse Step. However, in return, the Shield Rush Recon is increased from 10 to 20%. Also, the Sword and Shield Defensive Formation is the only perk that I know of that can still apply an absorption to allies instead of a Fortify, which is much stronger this patch. The Spear receives some relatively minor damage nerfs, but Perforate no longer staggers. Instead, it applies a 10% weaken per hit, so up to 30%. Along with that, the Fortify on Fortifying Perforate is being nerfed by approximately 40% to not completely take away any opportunity to trade into someone who's using Perforate on you. The Greatsword gets significant damage nerfs across the board. Onslaught heavy attacks now only charge 50% faster compared to the previous 100% faster, and for some inexplicable reason Crosscut has its cooldown increased by 5 seconds. The root on Relentless Rush is halved to 0.5 seconds, which means you definitely don't get a guaranteed heavy attack anymore, and the tracking or homing of the weapon has also been nerfed. The range of Calamity counter has also been reduced. The Rapier receives a change to Flourish and Finish. Now it staggers only on the first hit, and the second hit applies 1 bleed instead of staggering. Along with that, the first hit also sees damage nerfs. The Great Axe receives very significant damage nerfs to Gravity Well, and it's now also a ranged attack, so it will be countered by Elemental Aversion 2. The Hatchet gets nerfs to Feral Rush damage, and Defy Death gets an Overhaul. It's now an 0.5 seconds duration ability, which heals you for 50% of your base HP along with that. Base HP meaning it doesn't matter how much extra HP you build, only the base value counts. Fortifying Strikes and Enraged Strikes trigger differently now, mainly from heavy attacks, and Berserking Refresh now provides a lifesteal instead of giving you direct regeneration. Refreshing Torrent now has an internal cooldown of 0.2 seconds, so you can also not get multiple refreshes from a group of mobs at the same time. The bow gets an Evade Shot damage nerf, and Rapid Shot no longer staggers. Along with that, it gets moderate damage nerfs to various passives. The musket gets a bit of an overhaul as well. The stopping power damage is getting nerfed, but more importantly, the general accuracy is reduced while moving and aiming quickly. This penalty, however, was reduced by 20% on the PTR already, so it doesn't feel that bad if you actually test it. Ballistic Advantage is replaced by Steady Hand, which also increases your damage falloff overall, and this allows you to aim stable after 2 seconds of aiming. The Greater Accuracy perk removes accuracy penalty from hip shots, and the new targeting reticle has been overhauled since PTR, so it should hopefully show more precisely how accurate the weapon actually is in any given moment. Also related to the musket, the accuracy perk mod, low quality tallow, was reduced by 50%, otherwise it would just give you full accuracy, and the elemental gem falloff has been fixed, so the long range damage of the musket is affected significantly. I'll link a video in the corner here that breaks down the musket changes in more detail and how strong the nerf actually is. The Ice Gauntlet gets a nerf to Ice Spikes, the Mighty Spike no longer staggers, the Ice Pylon can now be despawned, which is very convenient, and Cold Reach is switched from targets further than 15 meters away to targets within 15 meters, which I don't really like, to be honest. Void Gauntlet gets a nerf to the damage of Scream. Baleful Tether and Essence Rupture have significantly increased projectile size, and both get damage buffs, the initial hit scaling for 100% now, and Tether gets a longer leash range as well, while Rupture gets more projectile speed. The Soul Eater perk for Tether now heals you if the tether is broken or the effect ends, not upon target death. Oblivion is getting nerfed, now it only provides 25% increased stamina regen instead of giving you flat extra stamina. There are also various other passive buffs that are a bit too much to cover them all in detail, but also keep in mind that the Void Gauntlet is affected by the 300 con change, so you can get grit with the Void Blade now, so the Void Gauntlet is in a very strong position. The Blunderbuss gets a nerf to Azoth's Shrapnel Blast, reducing the stamina damage by 50% and scaling down the damage when hit by multiple pellets. Claw Shot no longer allows you to do a burst cancel combo the same way it does at the moment, so it's significantly nerfed in that way. The Fire Staff receives a ton of buffs and changes. All of the abilities are getting some degree of overhaul except Flamethrower, so it's impossible for me to cover all of that here, but I will link a video right here if you're interested in the detailed Fire Staff changes, the breakdown of all of that, as well as how you could run the Fire Staff now, what build options you have. For the Life Staff, the stamina regeneration while in a Sacred Ground is halved, and the Absolve passive is no longer required to unlock other passives and is now independent. Magic weapons no longer cost mana on light attacks, and therefore the Absolve passive is now only for heavy attacks as well. There are also some trade skill changes. Golden Scarabs can now be used to craft tier 5 tools or bags. The first craft XP bonus is now times 3 instead of times 2, and these boni have been reset for everyone, so even if you're already at 200 you can get some quick aptitude cash out of this. Musical instrument skill gets a few changes to its progression. In the next days we'll talk about some other upcoming changes and some important things that you should be doing after the patch, so if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you get notified when those videos come out. As always, if you want the tips super early, I will be posting them on my Patreon. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me and making this video possible, and thank you for watching. SLOTH, out.